Hey, welcome to WACTS. This is episode 7. Why is my hair like this? Because I've decided whenever I'm about to get a haircut, I'm just gonna go like this and see what happens. So right now I go like this, and this is what happens. Pretty cool, right? This week we're covering February 24th to March 2nd. We're gonna talk about Better Call Saul. We're gonna talk about Last of Us, the video game. We're gonna talk about Gone Girl, the book, and the movie. We're gonna talk about house stuff in a new segment I call House Stuff. We're gonna talk about Parks and Recreation, the series finale. It's gonna be great. We can get right to it right now. Let's go. House. Okay, so my wife and I got a house back in August of 2014, and I've had a few things happening over the past few weeks related to snow and ice and shoveling and all sorts of crazy stuff with our road that I haven't talked about in here, but it's kind of worth it, especially for anyone else that might be going through that process of getting a house or looking at a house or considering renting versus owning and that kind of thing, because we lived in Brooklyn for 4 years renting, and now we have a house, which is fantastic. But of course there's a bit of a learning curve. I'm not going to cover too much about all the crazy stuff on our dirt road, which is a town road, but it's not maintained and it needs to be plowed by outside contractors and all that kind of stuff, because that's not something that's super relatable. But this week there's something that anyone who has a house and lives in a place that gets cold sometimes might be able to relate to. We have heating oil at this house, and we have 3 giant tanks, each at about 300 gallons, so that's 900 gallons, and it was filled up in early November. And so we thought, oh, you know, this is a ton of oil, like there's no way we're gonna run out of this over the course of the winter. And my wife and I have a wood stove, and we were using that to supplement the heating there. We tried to keep the thermostats pretty low, and it never even crossed our minds that we could run out. Well, surprise, surprise, on Friday we woke up and the house was freezing cold, and we had run out of oil. So this sparked a very long, complicated process, and to give you the short version, like someone was supposed to come on Friday to give us oil, then they decided there was gonna have to be a service charge for that because of our road, and so we said no thanks, and we got diesel, and I got diesel fuel all over my clothing, which still smells like diesel now because the nozzle at the gas station didn't quite fit inside the diesel canister, and then we brought the diesel canister back and tried to put it into our tank, but the pipe is in a weird place and there was no way to tilt it up in such a way where the diesel fuel could actually come out easily, so we had to like use a glass to pour a lot of it in, and the spout is really weird because of 2009 EPA regulations, which make it really difficult. So to anyone thinking about a house or anything like that, heating oil, keep track of it, gauge it. If you don't know how to bleed an oil tank, or a boiler I guess, that's really important to learn how to do. Basically, if you run out of oil and then you're going to refill it again, you can't just reboot the system, like you need to get all the air out of there. So there's like a little tiny nipple valvey thing in the boiler that needs to be unscrewed a little bit, and after you've re-added oil to the tank, you restart the system, and then you have like a plastic water bottle or something like that, and all this air and oil kind of spurts out, and you have to catch that, and then once it's a steady stream, then you tighten it again. The system's probably going to turn on and off a few times, and you turn it back on, and then hopefully everything works again. So we went from having 5 gallons of diesel that were working, and we're like, yay, and then Saturday we were supposed to get oil, and we waited all day, and I played The Last of Us, which I'll get to more of later, and they never came, and we missed a party, and it was all very, very sad, but you know, it was okay. We sat by the wood stove and we had some heat there, but the diesel, we only had 5 gallons for the night because of crazy messiness, and that ran out. And then finally there was supposed to be another truck coming Saturday night. First they came by the wrong road with the wrong direction. We told them not to. That truck barely got out, and then later they came with a smaller truck, which again went the way we said specifically not to go, and that got stuck, and they were like, oh, it's okay, we'll be there in a couple hours, and then it's like 8 p.m., 9 p.m., and then we get a call, we hear that the tow truck's there, but then the tow truck also couldn't get them out, so the car, or the 4x4 had to be left there all night, and then finally this morning on Sunday they finally brought someone, and there's just in a van, and they put like 30 gallons in the tank, so that's going to last us for a few more days, and there's supposed to be another delivery on Monday, so we'll see how that goes. I guess I can talk about that a little bit when I do the Better Call Saul segment. Anyway, so now there's oil in the house, but we had to restart the tank again. Moral of the story, watch your heating oil gauges if you have a house. It's very important to keep things warm. You don't want pipes to freeze, you don't want them to burst. All very important stuff. Hope you learned something. Video games. So on Saturday, when we spent the entire day waiting for oil, I just was playing The Last of Us, kind of peeking out the window, waiting for things to happen, and I got really far in the game. I got from the sniper area, where you finally get to use a sniper rifle. It's my favorite weapon, and it's really sad you get to keep it. Played from that all the way to the end of the game in one fell swoop. It was great. This game was unlike any game I've ever played. I've said before that if the narrative is compelling enough for a game, it'll transcend genre for me, and I'll happily play genres I wouldn't normally play. In this case, that's absolutely what happened. I wouldn't normally play games in the survival horror genre. I've never played games like Silent Hill or Resident Evil or anything like that. Just too needlessly scary for me. That's not my bag. The Last of Us the characters here are what really drove it for me. The relationship between Ellie and Joel is something I've never experienced in a game before, and I love wacky, crazy, convoluted narratives like Metal Gear Solid. That stuff really gets my rocks off, but it's the characters there that are driving me mostly. I enjoy all the different characters in that universe. Here, what was special is actually that relationship. The characters are great on their own, but I've never in a game before felt that connective tissue before, watching a relationship evolve. There's so many subtle things, and it says a lot about the quality of both the vocal acting and the motion capture acting for video games, that these really felt like real people to me, and little subtle expressions between Ellie and Joel over the course of the game really cemented their relationship in a meaningful way for me. There are little moments where like Ellie's trying to find out more about Joel and asking about like his history and his daughter and his wife, and you can see Joel like, this stern face trying to toe the line and like let her feel comfortable, but also making it very clear when like that's enough, we can't talk about that anymore. And that was fantastic. The gameplay itself really grew on me. At the beginning I was just getting frustrated because I was dying all the time, and I was getting scared because zombies of all shapes and sizes are jumping out of nowhere. And then I got the hang of it, and I had upgraded my weapons enough and figured out which ones I liked, and I was starting to do a lot better, and I was getting through the game a lot quicker. I still found myself enjoying the game more when I was fighting people versus the fungal zombies and that kind of thing, just because those guys were terrifying and they were a little bit less predictable. Like the humans, you could kind of figure out what they were doing, so I just enjoyed that more, but it all worked fine. There was a nice build of things. The way the zombies were set up, where there's like the runner version and the clicker version and the giant fungal face version, and they all had different qualities to them, that had a nice tier level to it. And then the crazy giant guys that would like try to crush your head, that's insane. But I actually like playing against the people, and I liked that the AI of the people kind of changed over the course of the game, as in like you were encountering different kinds of people. Like the last set of people before you make it to the end, minor spoilers here, before you make it to the hospital and are fighting the Fireflies, the team that you're fighting before that, who abducted Ellie and all that crazy stuff, they were really stealthy. They were really good at like hiding out and ambushing you, and that was really fascinating and fun to play with, and I really got a kick out of that. So The Last of Us, they're making a movie now, and I don't know what a movie can bring to this story that wasn't better served in a game, both because of the length of time you get to spend with these characters and the investment you have by actually helping them make decisions. The fact that you switch between Joel's perspective and Ellie's perspective, and you have that little side plot with Ellie when Joel's injured and you don't know what's happening to him. And the way the narrative is dealt out, and dealt out, and you don't know what's happened to him, and it's all so precisely done. There's such a cleanness to it, and the ending, I can't say enough about the ending. Like everyone says that an ending should be feel both inevitable and surprising in the moment, and that's absolutely the case here. I didn't see this ending coming at all. I thought that either Joel or Ellie were going to die. I thought that something horrible was going to happen at the end. I thought the Fireflies weren't going to exist. All these different things that seemed to be a little bit more predictable, and spoiler alert, the ending here, that Joel, who spends the entire game, trying to not get attached to Ellie and talking about how, he's willing to pass her off and just wants to get rid of her, and then at the end is willing to kill all these people. Like, he absolutely becomes a villain at the end, and he's willing to kill all these people and potentially damn the human race to rescue Ellie from a surgery. And of course, I love all the mystery around the surgery that needs to be done with Ellie. There was no guarantee that she was going to save the human race, but it was definitely, there was hope there. And the way that Joel lies to Ellie at the end, when he's driving her back to Tommy's camp and talking about how, oh, there were dozens of you and they gave up on finding a cure and all this stuff, and Ellie kind of clearly knows there's something wrong. And again, the acting here, when she looks at Joel and is like, are you telling me the truth about the Fireflies? And Joel's like, yes. And it ends perfectly there, because you know that their relationship has changed irreversibly. Like, Ellie already made it clear she knew that she had the potential to be the cure for the human race, and if Joel had asked her, are you willing to die for this, I think she would have said yes. But Joel got to a point, I think, where he could not live without her. He needed her as something to hold on to, and the idea of losing her, especially knowing that he was going to lose her in such a direct way, I think that was too much for him. And anyway, all I want to say is the game is absolutely fantastic. I give it 5 stars with a confidence of 5. I recommend it to everyone, whether you play these kinds of games normally or not. It is worth it for the narrative. I'm really glad I went through the whole thing. I'm going to check out the little prologue thing. I think it's called Left Behind soon. But yeah, Last of Us, it's the best. Bam! Bark! In Liss's book corner this week, she read The Coffee Trader by David Liss. She was entertained but not enthralled. She gives it 3 stars with a confidence of 3. Check it out, maybe. Finished reading Gone Girl, the book. I have to say I was enjoying it more and more and more. I reached the second half of the book where you find out what's actually going on with his wife, and right there the book had me so much more than it did before. In the first half I was kind of thinking like, oh, okay, I'm kind of enjoying this, but it's kind of meandering along. The characters are fun, I like the writing, but then that twist made everything so much more interesting. And then I'm thinking back about all these things that happened earlier in the book, and they all have double meanings, and it's great. And as the kind of seed planting that, you know, I was first introduced to with like Harry Potter as a kid, and it's still really delightful to see even more in more adult books. Then we get like the third act twist with everything with Desi Collins and that whole thing, and that was fantastic too. And I was really drawn in and just loved the planning and the way that all these twists were happening that I didn't see coming. Although, you know, if you watch my video from last week, there were a couple things there that I predicted where I was just kind of like throwing out these things, but I don't feel like, you know, anything was spoiled, because even though I kind of had a hint that a couple of those things were going to happen, the way in which they happened and why they happened were totally not in my mind when I was thinking of those things. So that's really fantastic. I do want to say when I got to the very end, the way it wraps up, and I'm just going to spoil this because it's the only way I can talk about it, the fact that Nick doesn't ever actually get one up on his wife, the fact that he in the end is basically left a prisoner, I understand kind of the perspective of doing that. I just have to say I don't think it was a very satisfying ending. It's really difficult to watch this woman do all these psychotic things over the course of the book and then not receive any retribution. And I understand maybe this is like a reaction to, you know, the typical thing where you expect to see a villain or an antagonist get their just desserts, but I just think it could have been done differently. Just something where there's a hint or some hope that maybe down the line, you know, she'll get what's coming to her. All the great narratives from, you know, I jump immediately to like the Breaking Bad and the Godfather and things like that, is when people get consumed by hubris or pride or their own brilliance, you need to see that overcome them in such a way where it destroys them. And to have her go out on top and just confirm for herself that she's the smartest and most brilliant person in that story, I mean, it feels a little bit about what bothered me about House of Cards, where, you know, Kevin Spacey's character Frank Underwood in that is just so much smarter than all the dum-dums around him that there's not a lot of thrill in watching it, because there's no concern throughout the entire show that anyone is ever going to outsmart him, and that takes a lot of the fun and a lot of the conflict out of it. But so again, though, most of the book did not feel like that. It's really only in that last couple chapters where I was like, oh, we're really ending here? Ugh. I mean, maybe, this sounds weird to say, but maybe a sequel would clear that up. But for now, you know, I enjoyed the book a lot. I'm going to give it 4 stars with a confidence of 3. Gone Girl. Movie. And now moving on to the movie version of Gone Girl. Watched that pretty much right after I finished reading the book, and I saw that with my wife who hadn't read the book, and we enjoyed it. We enjoyed it a lot. I think the casting was great. David Fincher, obviously, fantastic director. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross getting the music was really lovely. It had all the right tone things going on. The casting was really good. Neil Patrick Harris was an interesting choice for Desi Collins, but Rosamund Pike, Ben Affleck, really wonderful, especially because of the cleft chin. And I have to say, I mean, I think this always happens when you read a book and then see the adaptation of it in the movie. Everything really flew by quick in the movie. You know, stuff that really has a chance to breathe in book form obviously just needs to be whizzed by for the sake of containing a movie to a reasonable time length. And it felt like kind of a long movie. I mean, it's one of those things where I wasn't keeping track, but it felt like it was at least 2 hours. And I mean, I think that's necessary to at least get in all those major plot points. But, you know, again, same thing as with the book. I think even in the movie version, that ending is just, it's a little bit tricky to stomach. You just don't want to see her come out on top at the end. Like, that's just, as an audience member, I think you want to see something happen where someone knocks her down a peg, because, you know, she really is a sociopath. Like, she starts out in the book and seems very nice and what she calls the cool girl, and that diary she constructs is a very reasonable kind of real person, you would think, or at least a certain mentality of a real person where they might only want to show a certain side of themselves. But then the fact that she can be so very heartless toward the people around her, and you know, she doesn't care at all about the hundreds of people that are out searching for her and all this stuff. Like, it's all just to get back at her husband, and it makes her very, very unsympathetic. Like, yes, your husband cheated on you, but as I was saying, like in the book review, like, there are reasonable ways to go about this that don't affect and hurt so many people outside of your relationship. So anyway, I wanted to see something at the end that at least hinted at something happening to her down the line, even if it wasn't directly said there, where you could be like, oh, okay, well, that's gonna pay off later, whatever. Maybe a sequel, I don't know. We'll see. The movie I enjoyed a little bit less than the book, just because I think the writing style itself is actually what elevated the book a lot, getting inside those characters' heads in a way that the movie can't quite do in the same way. So I give the movie 3 stars with a confidence of 4. Television. Just finished watching Better Call Saul, episode 5, Alpine Shepherd Boy. They kind of broke a pattern there. All the episodes were ending with O. There was Nacho and Mijo and Hero, and this episode was actually going to be called Jell-O, but apparently because of copyright reasons or something like that, they couldn't name it Jell-O, but you can still pretend it's named Jell-O. I don't even actually know why this one's called Alpine Shepherd Boy. Anyone know why it's called that? I could Google it, who cares? I'm not sure what to think about this show right now. This was another episode kind of like the last one, where it kind of dragged in some parts. I mean, maybe I still need to just get used to the pacing of this show, but you know, I think back to Breaking Bad, and I thought the pacing there was so precise and so perfect, and tension would be ratcheted up, and if there was a slow moment or a slow scene, it was very intentional. It was always like they knew exactly what they were doing with your emotions, and everything was being done exactly the way that it needed to make the scene play out and climax and release and do all those things it needed to. Because the stakes aren't so crazy high in the show, sometimes it doesn't make sense to linger so much on scenes. Like, some of the scenes in this episode just dragged. They did not need to be that long. Saul in the old folks' home. Yeah, okay, there's his advertisements on the Jell-O. It was like a 5-minute scene. I mean, not that much happened in this episode. Yeah, of course we get Saul's brother in the hospital, and some of that was very touching, and there's a little bit of development in those relationships there, but there's not a lot of new information. Like, there's not a lot of new stuff here. I mean, you could make the case that we got confirmation that Saul's brother is definitely faking if we didn't know that before, but even then, like, you could make the case that when the nurse turns on the little bed and he doesn't notice it, maybe that's him referencing that he's only hypersensitive to certain frequencies or that kind of thing, so maybe that's not even answered. Interesting fun fact though, the nurse is actually the same nurse that was telling Jesse that he couldn't go in and see Brock when Brock was sitting Breaking Bad, so yay, it's all the same shared universe. My favorite part of this episode was actually in that last section with Jonathan Banks, and you know, maybe acting is part of this, and I think Bob Odenkirk's doing a fantastic job, but Jonathan Banks holds such gravitas and presence for me. I could watch that guy sit drinking a beer watching old movies for 47 minutes and I'd be relatively happy. I just am so electrified watching that actor. You know, and we didn't get that much new information there in his little segment at the end. You know, we know that he's estranged from his daughter. I'm guessing that was his daughter who drove up by him. You know, my guess would be that back when he was a beat cop in Philadelphia or whatever, he somehow ended up being responsible for the death of his daughter's husband. That's a total guess, but you know, we'll see. We know that, of course, eventually he reconciles enough with his daughter that he gets to see his granddaughter, who at this point in the show is probably barely born, or 1 or 2, or who knows. So we kind of know where that's headed, and it was nice. It was cool to end on this moment where it's like, oh my god, these Philadelphia cops have come all the way down to see him, and just that dead stare of like, you're a long way from home is great. So I'm excited to see where that goes, but again, for the rest of the episode, I'm just very aware of the passage of time while I'm watching the show. Some of these episodes feel like they're an hour and a half long when they're not. Thank God they're not doing the Sons of Anarchy thing and just making episodes a heck of a lot longer for no reason. But Breaking Bad, the time would fly by and I wouldn't even know that I had watched something, you know, it would be done so quick. I'd be like, what? It can't be over. That was just 20 minutes. And no, it's always the full 47 or whatever. But anyway, we'll see where it goes. I mean, I'm still enjoying the show, but I want to see some developments. I want to learn new information. I'm fascinated by these characters, but I'm not being given anything. It's like I'm really craving sugar cereal, I'm really craving frosted mini wheats, and all I'm being given is mini wheats. That's taken right from my life. Better Call Saul, episode 5. I'm gonna call it Jell-O. I'm giving it 3 stars with the confidence of 3. This week, Parks and Recreation, one of the greatest TV shows ever to grace our screens, ended, and it was exactly what I wanted it to be. The ending felt equal parts Cheers and 6 Feet Under, and it was just a really lovely tribute to what made the show so special for me, which was, you know, the joy in little victories and workplace relationships and what it's like to do, as I think Leslie says, something along the lines of like work worth doing with people you love. And you know, this is one of the only shows I watch, really the only one actually I can say, where it was just lovely to hang out with these characters for 20 minutes a week. Even if the conflict of the episode wasn't, you know, anything to write home about, it was still, these personalities just were so wonderful and the connective tissue between them, kind of like what I was saying with The Last of Us, just rang so true. You know, these people enhanced each other. On their own, these were all interesting characters, but when you put Leslie and Ben together, Andy and April together, you know, these are more, it's more than the sum of its parts. And I'm really going to miss these characters. And of course, in the wake of Harris Whittles and everything there, I mean, there's certainly a bittersweetness to the whole show ending. But, you know, the show really, for all intents and purposes, ended a few weeks ago. Like, all the major conflicts had been resolved, and it was just kind of doing a victory lap for a couple weeks, which I think it totally earned. It was just a chance to really have these characters go out, get what they want, which, you know, I think we always knew they were going to get what they wanted, and it's nice. You feel like they deserve it, and it's nice in a world full of, you know, great dramatic shows where horrible things are happening to people, to have a show where you can be like, yeah, you deserve that, Leslie. You be the, spoiler, governor of Indiana, and maybe the president of the United States. There's all sorts of weird theories now based on that final episode, when, like, the Secret Service agent is touching Ben or Leslie, and, you know, it's probably Leslie, but then maybe it's like the Clintons, but in reverse, and maybe Ben becomes president later, or maybe they're not president at all, because there's plenty of people that have Secret Service agents. So that was a great little mystery. I loved the flash forwarding. Like, a lot of people really didn't like the fact that this season jumped forward 3 years. I thought it was great, and similarly with the finale, it was really great to just peek a little bit into the futures of all these characters. I loved it so much, in fact, that when you check out the video section, you'll see that I made a video related to it. You'll see that in a minute. The ending that affected me the most was probably for Ron Swanson. This was a character that started out kind of one-dimensionally. He was just kind of an obstructionist bureaucrat that just believed in the opposite of everything Leslie believed in, and was kind of an antagonist for the first season of the show, I guess, not too much longer after that. And he became a really fleshed out, interesting character with a lot of hidden layers under his much more gruff, manly exterior. Everything from Duke Silver to the way he loves puzzles. And, you know, Nick Offerman just sold this character so well with, like, the way that he could be very stern and then just crack a smile in a way that just felt very much perfect for that character. So seeing him, you know, leave his company and go to talk to Leslie and say, like, I really don't know what to do. And that episode a few weeks ago when Leslie and Ron were fighting, and you see Ron, like, feeling really lonely after the entire department starts to change, like, that was really heartbreaking, like, really genuinely feelings. And to have his ending where Leslie, you know, is like, I see you need help, I'm gonna help you, I'm gonna find something good for you, and so perfect, you know, this piece of land that they saved earlier in the season, and to make that basically the domain of Ron Swanson to protect, and to have these park rangers, and when you see him just kind of go out in the canoe, for me that was akin to watching Claire in her car at the end of 6 Feet Under, like, driving off. It's just this, like, great things are happening and the future looks so bright, and it was just really wonderful. It was a really touching finale. I'm so grateful for everyone involved with the show, all the actors, all the crew, all the writers, and I'm just gonna miss this show. I'm gonna miss this show, I'm gonna miss these characters a lot, and I give both the series finale and the show itself, Parks and Recreation, 5 stars with a confidence of 5. Podcasts. 3 podcasts from this week I recommend you check out. The first 2, pretty much all the things I was just saying about Parks and Recreation, also covered in Talking TV with Ryan and Ryan. This was before the show ended, but they absolutely predicted everything that was going to happen at the end. They also, while they were doing the podcast, both Mo and Ryan found out about the death of Harris Whittles, and in real time they actually kind of launched into this whole discussion about what made the show so special, and why, you know, the relationships we have with each other, and why TV and all these things can be so meaningful to us. And it's just a really beautiful, genuine moment, or, you know, it's like half an hour that arises out of this discovery and this tragedy right after, you know, they spend all this time talking about what a happy, wonderful show Parks and Recreation is, and then really mine some genuine, like, life importance, life affirming discussion out of it, which is really great. So Talking TV with Ryan and Ryan, this is the episode called Peaky Parks, and they also talk about, like, Peaky Blinders and that kind of stuff. But that episode, 5 stars, a confidence of 5. Love it when people get deep in podcasts and share themselves that much with their audience. On a slightly lighter note, Firewall and Iceberg podcast, they just talked about the ending of the show, and I absolutely agree with everything they say. They talk about, you know, who were the best characters, who was underdeveloped, all those kinds of things, and again, why these were just such wonderful people to hang out with on a week-to-week basis. So check those out. Lastly, you know, You Made It Weird with Pete Holmes. Of course, Pete Holmes, all sorts of stuff related to Harris Whittles from last week. You know, he was on the show 3 times, and this has nothing to do with with Parks and Recreation, except, I guess, okay, so this week Pete Holmes talked to, or in You Made It Weird, talks to Emily V. Gordon, Kumail Nanjiani's wife. They both do the Indoor Kids podcast together, and this was filmed, or they recorded it a couple weeks ago, so there's no discussion about Harris Whittles or Parks and Recreation or anything like that. They both knew him, but in the introduction, Pete, you know, talks a little bit about it, and that's really touching because they were close. They were really good friends, and you know, painful to listen to, but I think he expresses his feelings towards his audience very well. But then the podcast itself with Emily V. Gordon, she's really kind of an amazing person. She used to be like a psychologist or something. She worked with families and children and that kind of thing. And the way that she goes into the psychology of Pete a little bit, like the interview really gets turned on him, and they talk about him having, you know, this savior complex and all that kind of stuff in a way that's really fascinating, the way you grow up in a situation where you feel a responsibility to help your parents and your siblings and make sure everyone's okay, and you seem to get a lot of joy or reduction in anxiety, possibly, in making sure the people around you are fine and making sure that they're achieving their full potential, and maybe even if you're pushing them to do things they don't want to do and they're going to resent you for it, that's what you need. And Emily, of course, says like, well, that's ridiculous, you shouldn't be doing any of this. But anyway, it's as these episodes usually are, a very long discussion, and I recommend every minute of it, so check those out. 5 stars, confidence of 5 for all 3 podcasts. Okay, that's it for this week. Thank you for watching. Again, I really don't know what's going on next week. I think I might be talking about some work stuff. I'm doing some fascinating new things with VR, and again, working with this idea that you look at something and then you can click, cool stuff happens, that's all neat. I'm going to be possibly having some surprise guest interviews, so that'll be really fun. Check that out. And videos this week. Well, Parks and Recreation. I got so inspired and catharticized by the finale that I really wanted to do something more with it. And so I took the Sia song Breathe Me, which is used in 6 Feet Under to great effect, used a similar kind of flash forward style with fades to white and that kind of thing, and I made that into a video that's making lots of people cry, which makes me very happy in a way that people crying doesn't usually make me happy, so check that out, it's great. And just another little video for this week. I was playing with Unity and getting some new stuff figured out with like the image effects, which are not that easy to use on mobile devices, but very useful for if you're building a desktop application. And you know, they make some really beautiful effects and aren't that hard to use. I just had a bunch of salt, so my mouth is becoming kind of dry as we speak. It's very weird. But check that out. There's some cool image effects, and now I'm getting really self-conscious. But that might help you out if you use Unity. You'll want to see some of the different things those do without having to click through them all yourselves. And I think that's it for now. So thank you for watching. If you have any questions, comments, recommendations, let me know below, and I will see you next week.